afternoon. Welcome to SAMCEDA's 64th Annual Meeting. And even though you see a few empty chairs here and there, I want to tell you this is officially a sellout. And we're always happy when we've sold all these seats. We like when people come, but we're happy to have sold all the seats. I'm Sherry Sager, and I have the honor and privilege of being the chair of the SAMCEDA board this year. I am also with Lucille Packard Children's Hospital. So one of the things we're changing up this year is I'm not going to read to you all of our wonderful sponsors. Well, it's blank right now. At some point, we'll have a slide up there, but throughout the reception time when you came in here, we had all of the sponsors up on slides that were rotating with actually some information about each of them. And so there's the slide that just lists them all. So we want to thank our Platinum Chairman Circle sponsors, our corporate and business, and of course the media. All of the information about our sponsors as well as today's event will be posted on SAMCEDA's website and on the Facebook page. And for those that tweet, they will also be tweeting about it. I want to start by thanking the SAMCEDA Executive Committee and the Board of Directors, and I know a lot, if not all of them, are here. So rather than singling them out, if all of the members of the board of SAMCEDA could please rise for a moment. Come on, I know there's more. Thank you. Thank you all for all of your hard work, and their names at some point will be listed on a slide. And then I also would like to thank the elected officials who are here, and hopefully I'm not missing anyone that walked in and I didn't see them. So I want to, actually I don't see him yet, but I've heard he's on his way, State Senator Jerry Hill. We have a special guest today, and that's the Mayor of Galway, Ireland, Frank Fahey. Mayor Fahey. As people walk in as I introduce. From the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors, we have Supervisor Warren Slocum, Supervisor Don Horsley, and Supervisor Adrian Tissier. Thank you. And we have some current mayors. From South San Francisco, we have Mark, okay, this is my test. Adiego, sorry. Mark Adiego. Rich Klein from Menlo Park. Joe Goethals from San Mateo. Thank you, Joe. And Ann Keegren from Burlingame. Back. We have some council members that are here as well. From Belmont, we have Davina Hurt. I haven't seen her yet, but from Menlo Park, Kirsten Keith. And from Belmont, Charles Stone. We also have a few former mayors that we'd like to introduce. Coming all the way up from San Jose, former Mayor Ron Gonzalez. From somewhere close by, former Mayor of Redwood City, Jim Harnett. And we'll keep the theme of Redwood City going, former Mayor Barbara Pierce. I'd also like to ask you to join me in thanking Roseanne Faust and Amanda Bursom for the wonderful job they did putting on today's event. And a great big thank you and a shout out to Oracle and all of the staff from Oracle who helped to prepare this wonderful event and the meal. So thank you to Oracle. And if I would have turned the introductions around, I could have timed it just right as State Senator Jerry Hill has just walked in. So I want to encourage you to follow SAMCEDA on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. We're doing something new today, and Roseanne Faust is going to tell you more about it, but we're going to have our own version, and we're calling them the THRED Talks. So welcome to THRED Talks Year 1, and with that, I'd like to introduce Roseanne Faust, the President and CEO of SAMCEDA.
Let's give a big round of applause for Sherry Sager. We are so lucky that we have such a committed board of directors at SAMCEDA. These are people that give of their time, their talent, their treasure on a regular basis. They're people that I can go to, that are mentors of mine, and frankly, that are longstanding San Mateo community members that are with fabulous corporations and organizations. And I really would like them all to stand up again so I can personally thank them. And then we're hoping that folks will tweet today and put this meeting on your Facebook, on your LinkedIn, because it really is something unique and new to San Mateo County. To take off of TED Talks, we have our own version of THRED Talks. And if you notice, our annual update is at your places, and it talks about weaving San Mateo County together. And we talk about kind of the big 5 challenges that we face. And I'm not sure that there's one person in this room that in a conversation daily with your family, your friends, your colleagues, your coworkers, that you're not talking about the big 5 of transportation, housing, regionalism, the economy, and development. But before we get into THRED Talks, I want to give you a little bit of background. And we had before leading through what does SAMCEDA do and who are we? We're an old organization. We were founded in 1953 on the peninsula, primarily to promote business, and to promote business in terms of why do you need business in your community? What does it bring? How does it help the economy to have successful businesses? And we've morphed over the years to really encompass quality of life, the environment, energy, and how we're able to do all of that is by leading through partnerships. And this slide just gives you a few snippets of the people that we work with on a regular basis. Right now, we are heavily focused on the 101 corridor. How many wish the 101 corridor was free of traffic? How many think that we're going to get there in our lifetime? How many are willing to help and think outside the box and talk about new ways to manage the 101? Thinking about, oh, I like this. We got hands up. Paul Krupka, who is working on the 101-84 interchange, and other folks. It would be great if everyone can join that conversation about the 101 managed lanes. The Caltrain electrification. Wouldn't it be terrific to get on newly electrified trains that don't spew diesel fuel, that can accommodate double the amount of passengers? 64,000 people ride Caltrain every day. And we can double that by electrifying Caltrain. So we have Caltrain and Samtrans and their board and their leadership here today, and they need our help. What else do we do? Jessica Mullen is here, and Jessica brought together with the County of San Mateo and John Malpe and the Board of Supervisors, Adrian and Warren and Don and Carol and Dave, the Jobs Housing Task Force. They put all different people in a room together. And I'm talking about nonprofit and for-profit developers. I'm talking about social equity groups. I am talking about the business community and elected officials and all of the nonprofits that actually make this county the special place that it is, to get together and really come up with creative solutions for our housing crisis. And SAMCEDA is proud to be a part of that. We also lead through advocacy. So when we talk about advocacy, this isn't about just SAMCEDA and the business community. This is about advocacy for all 20 cities and our county, all 21 entities, to make sure that San Mateo County has a voice and a seat at the table when we're at regional forums, when we're with regional business groups, and these are just a few of the things that we're involved with. We're hoping next Tuesday, Measure AA, which is the $12 parcel tax that is going to supply over a 20-year period about $500 million for bay restoration of lands that are held in the public domain currently, to restore it so it'll be for flood control, for prevention of the infrastructure that we have around the bay, and that comes next Tuesday. We're active in shuttle programs with the Water Emergency Transportation Authority to try to get more ferries, again, moving people. So SAMCEDA is busy, and when we talk about getting everyone together, we don't just talk, we actually do. Leading through communication, we like you to know what we're doing on a regular basis. There is a lot of discussion lately about, and I'm going to put down the papers, lack of transparency with business and government. There are people out there in all of our communities that think that things get done behind the scenes. Folks, they don't. They get done in rooms like this and conference rooms at your place of business. They get done in parks and at playgrounds. They get done at the grocery store. They get done in the bank line. It's because San Mateo County is about working together, and it's about being open. It isn't about doing things behind closed doors and not communicating. Sure, can we communicate everything that we're all doing? No, because that would actually be more than a full-time job, and we'd all be doing it on a regular basis, and it would be a little bit challenging. But are we open and honest and straightforward with people? Yes. And so by communicating and telling people what we do as public agencies, as business organizations, as corporations who constantly communicate with their employees, we do that and we do it well. And one of the things I'm going to ask of all of you today is remember parts of the conversation that we have today, and when you hear our speakers for THRED talks, think about what they say and please share them. Share them with your social networks. Share them with your children's soccer team. Share them with the Friday night ladies who, I was going to say ladies who drink, but how about ladies? Obviously, I got something on my mind, but let's be honest, you know, there are times that we all would just like a nice glass of wine. And gentlemen, when you're out there with your buddies, think about the conversations and just take a moment to kind of call people out that say, you know, that business group, they're hiding stuff, or that elected official, they're taking money. Folks, in San Mateo County, those things don't happen. And we are lucky and fortunate that we live in the place that we do, that we are afforded the opportunities that we have, that we can be in Oracle Conference Center today on a beautiful Friday talking about our 5 biggest challenges and figuring out how to solve them together and then communicating them. Leading through research, this is something that I think all of you can benefit from. SAMCEDA in 2016 decided to contract directly with Marin Economic Consulting for a San Mateo County-centric report. And I know the typeface is pretty small on here, but you can go to our website. But the report is going to include, and it is going to be updated as frequently as new information comes out in each of the subject areas. But that research is available to everyone. It is not just for SAMCEDA members. It is for our members, our partners, stakeholders. It is for everyone to use as they see fit. And it would be really helpful because it really talks about our county. It doesn't put us with the MSA of San Francisco and Silicon Valley. It talks about San Mateo County. So, as a kind of a lead up to our THRED talks and introducing our speakers, if you look at the program that's sitting on top of the annual update, you'll see the order of THRED. We'll have transportation, followed by housing, followed by regionalism, followed by the economy, and followed by development. These 5 individuals, I was very excited because when we put together a program like this, we want folks that you may not have heard from before or be that familiar with to talk about our challenges. Because again, it's getting different people to the table and different people involved in the conversation. If you flip over the agenda, you're going to see their detailed bios. Jeral Poskey with Google, Isabella Chu with Redwood City Forward. We have Davina who's going to handle regionalism. We have Mike Dorsey handling the economy, and Rob Hollister handling development. These are really talented, very sharp, and very nice individuals. And I can tell you, since Amanda and I helped organize the presentation, put it together, you're going to be in for a treat today. So what we want to do is talk about how do you balance boomers and millennials. The whole idea of THRED Talks is really the big 5 challenges and then balancing the needs of boomers and millennials, because that's kind of at the crux of each of these 5 areas and how to figure out, and when you think about it, that's people from 85 to 90 down to their mid to late 20s. So you have a pretty broad swath of the population involved. So each of the presenters are going to come up and have about 10 minutes to present their particular topic. And then after this is over today, we have asked each of the individuals to help us with about a 750-word essay that we're going to put together with other essays from folks that we're going to reach out to in a THRED Talk book, a presentation that we'll have on our website that we'll be able to give out, and we're going to change that out. So it's going to be San Mateo County's version of how do we handle some of these challenges. So if you're interested in being a part of our THRED Talks and our ongoing dialogue, please let us know. Our information is on the website. But I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to attend our annual meeting, for being here, for being a part of the conversation, and I hope you'll give each of our speakers a real warm welcome. So we're going to start with Jeral Poskey, Google Transportation.
When you think of Google's transportation program, you probably think of this. The Google bus, all over the Bay Area. What you may not know is that this is a historical accident. Google didn't intend to be a transportation provider, but what happened was when the company was young, a group of people realized there was really no public transit service to our campus in Mountain View, and they got together and created a van pool. And the van pool became a shuttle, and the shuttle became 2 shuttles, and 2 became 4, and now we have more than 200 shuttles moving more than 3 million, getting close to 4 million people a year. That's more than 6,500 cars a day off the highway. And if you can imagine 101 with another few thousand cars on it, you would know it would be bad if we didn't have this going. And by the way, today there are still only 3 public transit buses that come to the corporate headquarters of Google, not Microsoft headquarters, LinkedIn and Intuit headquarters. So we still have to continue the bus system. But when we think of our transportation system, we also think of all the other things you have to do, not just deliver them to the office, but you have to connect them to everything they need during the day. So we have fleets of electric cars, a massive EV charging set of stations. We have 1,000 bikes to get people around. We have an e-bike fleet now. And we even have an infrastructure program where we invest in creating infrastructure that should have been there all along. Where most of our offices are, when these campuses were built, everything was so assumed that people would drive everywhere for every lunch, for every meeting, that sidewalks weren't even put in. So we've started with sidewalks, crosswalks, and now we've built bike lanes and now entire bike paths. You see Congresswoman Anna Eshoo in the center introducing our newly resurfaced 4 miles of the Bay Trail, which is a connection now It was a nice path before, but it wasn't a place where bikers wanted to be. And now we've connected Palo Alto, Mountain View, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, and into San Jose with a really smooth, awesome bike path. So we like to engage. Let me dispel two myths. One myth that we are a Mountain View company and that our people live in San Francisco. Number one, we're now way beyond being a Mountain View company. In fact, we're pretty heavily in San Mateo. We have our 2 offices in South San Francisco from 2 of Google's related alphabet companies. YouTube is growing strongly in San Bruno, and even though we're not occupying them yet, we're getting ready to occupy a number of facilities in Redwood City that we have acquired over the last few years. So we are present all across the peninsula, all up and down the peninsula. Also in the background, you see a heat map of where our employees live. And while a number of them do live in San Francisco, they really live everywhere. And that's why we're still in the bus business. But predominantly, people do like to live close to where they work. And so we've identified that as saying people actually do, almost half of our employees live within 11 miles, which is one of the reasons why we were led to look at biking. And that will be a segue to my next point of getting everybody connected. On a good day, we can have 10% of our employees, almost 2,000 people, biking to work, which is great for local traffic. But our VPs challenge us, why can't you double that? Why can't you get 20% of the people biking to work? And we looked and people were telling us, I don't feel safe, it doesn't feel safe out there. And we looked at the map of the area bike paths and said, there's lots of bike paths, there's lots of bike lanes. Why is it that you don't feel safe? And the answer is, if you think in a ski analogy, the green lines being green runs, a lot of them are double black diamonds. They're not really connected bike paths. You've got these really dangerous, high-speed, cars merging sections in the middle. And so we went back and said, okay, where are the gaps? And where are we going to work on to fix the gaps in our system? And a lot of them were logical, highway entrances, expressways. And we realized there were some gaps that weren't as logical. There were places that it should have been easy. And you look at the map again, you look at some of these gaps, and you don't have to be from the area to tell, if I told you it's Palo Alto, Mountain View, and Sunnyvale, where are the city limit boundaries? They're where the gaps are. We haven't always thought regional. We haven't thought about connecting with our neighbors. And a lot of that is a little bit logical. If you had always thought of yourself as an island, you don't build a highway to the water's edge. You just build it close to the edge and you don't worry about the rest. And even some very, very well-meaning consultants, still make this mistake. And I think it's easy to fix. The good news is these problems are easy to fix. Mountain View had consultants that said, here's a great set of bike lanes that go all the way to the city limit boundaries. This is a plan. Where should we focus our attention? They took the plan to the BPAC, our Bike Ped Advisory Committee, and showed them this map. And even these great consultants are still bringing this map without showing them where should we focus our attention, what would help to know what our neighboring cities were doing. So small changes in how we approach the problem like this, just thinking regionally from the beginning, can have a huge impact. Here's a map of how people move around the Bay Area. It's clustered in some places. People do tend to stay local, but really movement doesn't stop at city limit boundaries. Movement doesn't stop at county boundaries. Here's a map of each of the transit agencies and their stops. With the exception of the ferry, BART, and Caltrain, the systems are pretty much planned as islands. If you're in San Francisco along the peninsula, San Jose, or up toward Oakland, at least you can get to the edge of your network and step to the next one. If you really look at the East Bay and North Bay, once again, they really are planned as islands and don't even connect to their neighbors. So this is the reason why Google is still, after all these years, still in the shuttle business. Roseanne stole a lot of what I wanted to say on this next section. I mean, we live in the peninsula. Googlers work in the peninsula. We have offices here. We're growing here, both in the growth in office space. And as you all know, the peninsula is a great place to live, especially being between, just in the middle of everything that makes Silicon Valley and the Bay Area so nice. So we intend to be here a while, and we've got 5 main priorities. Bikes, number 1, I mentioned. There's a lot of people who are only going 1, 2, 3 exits on the freeway. Getting more and more people biking to work is good for the area in so many ways. Connected transit. It's in 2 ways. Number 1, let's connect the transit like the map I just showed you. We shouldn't have these big gaps. And also, people have to be able to connect to transit, whether that's biking, shuttles, walking. We're now seeing evidence, I hope it turns out to be true, but Uber and Lyft are reporting great success in bringing people to transit, and that getting our existing transit systems working really well is very important to us. Highway 101, this is the absolute critical element of peninsula transportation. And great progress now. There's been a long delay, and how does it connect? So a lot of progress lately, and how we add additional HOV lanes, how we add additional capacity, not just in lanes, but in other management measures to add capacity to this corridor. I'll say we're seeing good progress. I hope it continues, and I really want to see that it's not just San Mateo fixing this alone. It really needs to say it's integrated with what happens in Santa Clara, and it's integrated with what happens in San Francisco. Activate the Bay. We had a ferry trial. We ran a ferry for 1 month, and people absolutely loved it. Getting permits to do this for the long haul was challenging to us, but we see that some private companies and working with Facebook have picked that up. We really do believe that the Port of Redwood City is a tremendous regional asset that is being underutilized, and we really hope that we can find ways to really develop the Bay. And Caltrain, I almost can't say enough about Caltrain. There's a long-range plan to double capacity. It totally needs to be done. That capacity will get used up as fast as it is created. The only thing that we can ask is that it happen faster, and that the regional agencies communicate, the bodies, so the 3 counties can give them a reliable funding source. On the notion of connectedness, I'll also say it's not just connecting the transit system, but it's connecting what used to be silos between modes. And in reality, the ferry discussion shouldn't happen separately from the 101 discussion. The 101 discussion is not separate from what happens to Caltrain. Caltrain is not separate from what happens on 280. These are all integrated, and we need to make sure we get the connections going between all of the people representing the modes. And of course, our agencies beginning to connect more and more. The connections across public sector, private sector, nonprofits, all of that needs to happen. And when I think of this challenge or the need for that to happen, I'm reminded of a quote from a book by Adam Kahane. He was present when South Africa began the post-apartheid era. And they had a lot of problems. And these are people who had been pretty much literally at war for decades, who now had the assignment of creating a post-apartheid government, and how would the country work after that. So they had a saying, a joke that floated around, that they really had 2 options, a practical option and a miracle option. Getting together, praying that a band of angels would come down and solve their problems for them, that was the practical option. If they were to sit down, communicate, and work together to solve the problem, that would be a miracle. I don't share the cynicism in this regard. What we've seen locally, just very recently, the city managers of Redwood City, Menlo Park, have signed an agreement with Palo Alto, Mountain View, and Stanford to say, we're going to work together and coordinate our bike solutions. We see the agencies working together for the 101 corridor. MTC and ABAG are working together. And most importantly, I see this room. This room is full of people who represent public, private, nonprofits. We represent different interests, but we understand that connectedness is not just transportation connectedness. Housing is connected. Regional economic development is connected. And this room gives me good faith and confidence that we are going to come together. We are going to connect all the silos that used to exist, and we're going to build a much better San Mateo County and Bay Area. So on behalf of Google, I really look forward to working with all of you, and thanks for having me.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Isabella Chu, and I'm the founder of Redwood City Forward. And the purpose of this organization is really to broaden the conversation around land use policy in the Bay Area. And I'm here today to talk about making room in Silicon Valley, why it matters, and how to do it. So the way I got here was I was actually the research manager for a large division at Stanford School of Medicine, and I was hiring a lot of RAs. And what I found is that housing played a bigger and bigger role in my ability to recruit, retain employees, and that it really impacted what I had to pay them in order to take the job. For example, you have to pay a research assistant about 20% more at Stanford than you'd have to pay the same employee at Berkeley. And it wasn't just research assistants. In every conversation around faculty recruitment, we had to talk about housing and what kind of recruitment package we would have to put together to enable them to live close to campus, which is an expectation for faculty. And it also impacted our ability to retain people like medical assistants since they were taking jobs closer to where they lived in outlying areas. And so all this got me to thinking about institutions and businesses really have to address housing, and particularly housing close to where the jobs are, in order to remain prosperous. But the thing that really got me caring about this was the large and growing body of research on the way where we live impacts health and well-being of individuals. So this is a slide from a paper published a couple years ago by Mark Cullen and Victor Fuchs, and it's a kernel plot showing the probability of survival till 70 by county for every county in the US where the number is big enough to make this calculation. And what you say is there is a huge dispersion, and if you're a black male in the poorest counties in the US, you have less than a 40% chance of making it to the age of 70. If you're in the richest counties in the US, which is San Mateo and Santa Clara, for example, you have almost an 80% chance. And Raj Chetty has really done a lot of work in this space, looking at the impacts of migrating from one of the counties on your left to the counties on the right. And it turns out it really impacts the health and the wealth of the individuals doing the migrating. And it got me to thinking that making room in prosperous places had the potential to be a very powerful public health and anti-poverty intervention. And so how do we do this, and why is it so tough? Well, it's fairly straightforward. There's a very strong demand for housing. The economy's doing great. There's lots of good jobs. And there's short supply. And the reason there's short supply is limited land. We have bays and open space. Usually when cities pencil out offices versus housing, offices come out a bit better. There can be strong neighborhood resistance. Every time a big building full of housing is proposed, the city council gets lots of angry letters. And there's a very high regulatory burden. And over time, this has resulted in a very large housing jobs imbalance, which I'm sure most of you know. Regionally, it's about 1.3 to 1. In places like Palo Alto, that ratio is closer to 3 to 1. So how do we get more housing? And I'd say the simplest solution is to go back to building cities the way we did for hundreds of years prior to the implementation of modern land use codes. So this means things like greater height, close to transit. It means allowing for greater density, reducing setbacks and upzoning where it makes sense. It means allowing for mixed use so that people can live and work and shop in the same place. And it means an end to parking minimums, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So this really illustrates the difference between human-centered city planning and car-centered city planning. So the picture on the upper left is downtown Mountain View. You see it's very compact, it's very walkable, it's very inviting. There are businesses along the street, and then you've got offices and residences kind of above in the back. And on the right is car-centered design. So you see a giant parking lot, and the business is way far back. This is not somewhere you would ever want to really walk to. And then the same thing happened to residential design. You see, garage-scape with housing in the back, whereas on the right, you see the building all the way up to the sidewalk, so very little setback, and you can pack a lot of housing, and I would say very inviting and good-looking housing, in a small space. And the way I really started thinking about the car-centric nature of modern planning was that I keep my bikes in our garage. It's pretty much empty. I just have 2 bikes in there, and I thought, I can put them in a shed or something and convert our little garage to an apartment for 2 people. And this is a model of what that could look like. But when I looked into it, I found out this is actually illegal. This is the minimum parking requirement for Redwood City, which is actually one of the most progressive cities on the peninsula with regard to housing policy. And for my little 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom tract house, I both have to have a 20-foot setback in front, which allows 1 to 2 cars, and I have to provide a 2-car garage. And if you think about it, this is a housing guarantee for cars. And in the most brutal housing market in the country, there's no law or mandate that says I have to provide an apartment for my aging parents. There's no law that says you have to provide a bedroom for your kid. And if you want to convert that housing for cars to housing for people, you're prohibited from doing so. So I thought, this is nuts. I wonder if anyone's actually looked into it. And as it turns out, it's one of the most studied and well understood policies. There's a flotilla of studies on this, and pretty much every economist that's looked at it thinks it's a bad idea to have parking minimums. And there's a lot of reasons. They degrade the landscape, they encourage sprawl, they drive up the cost of everything, but really what they do is they drive up the cost of housing, particularly at the bottom end of the market. And this is how they do that. These two pictures are from the same residential neighborhood in Seattle. And you can see the building on the right. It's an old-time building, and it's built right up to the curb, and they've got about 4 stories of housing there. The 2 buildings on the left were built after modern land use codes came into play, so you see bigger setbacks, you lose some of the housing there. But then there's a mandate that there's parking provided. So the whole bottom floor of both of these buildings has been replaced with parking. So not only have we lost housing, but now the builder has to get the same amount of money out of fewer units, so that drives up the cost. And I would argue probably makes it more expensive to build high quality housing, again, because you have to get more money from fewer units. So what do I propose? To remove parking minimums and let the market decide the right amount and the right price for parking. And the reason I believe that this will have a good outcome is because businesses and landowners and developers have a very strong incentive to get the amount and the price right. If they don't, they lose customers and they lose tenants. If they don't get it right, they have the flexibility to work with those around them to find the right balance and the right price. So just to review, human-centered city design is economically productive. Free parking does not generate revenue, and it displaces people and businesses. Good human-centered design makes room for more people close to jobs, thereby reducing commute time, which both contributes to retention of employees and also improves public health, but I don't have time to get into that. It's hospitable to people, it's walkable, and I would add, it's beautiful. So in conclusion, human-centered design and people make cities interesting, they make cities economically productive, and if we make room close to where the jobs are, our cities will continue to thrive. Thank you.
So thank you for the invitation, SAMCEDA. I'm honored to be here with all of you and to talk about a subject that California has been debating wildly since the 60s and affects everyone in this room. It's the concept of regionalism. America has always been the great experiment, a place where people come to try and do things differently. The San Francisco Bay Area is a progressive microcosm of that experiment. Collectively, we've struggled, changed, and survived by reinventing ourselves and learning to think differently, with all the while creating a unique identity that calls people from all over the world to participate in the laboratory of sorts. Now, regionalism is an extension of that experiment, and is often defined as a political ideology that focuses on the common interests of a particular region and tries to address the problems of postmodern metropolitan landscapes. Now, the definition is elusive because it means so many different things to different people. In fact, they've even separated old regionalism from new regionalism. For some of its supporters, regionalism entails new forms of collaboration among business elites, tax-based sharing, tying the fate of localities together. For still others, regionalism evokes the image of authoritative institutions. And yet and still, I have read that regionalism in California is a covert plan of UN Agenda 21 to destroy and globally control our way of living. Now, if we strip away the political rhetoric and the conspiracy theories, the plain language and common sense of this expression is area-wide planning, coordination, and cooperation of issues that we all share in common: air, water, land, transportation, economics, and energy. Now, I'm going to step back from the statistical details that the speakers have gone to and we've reviewed quite a bit, and focus on the common denominator, the linchpin, so to speak, that greatly affects all of these areas that we've been discussing this afternoon, and propose 5 areas to reevaluate in moving the mission forward of weaving San Mateo County together. Now, this common denominator can be the gateway, or it could be a hurdle to actions, the stepping stone, or a stumbling block. It's really the thread that combines housing, transportation, economics, and development. Are there any guesses what it could be? Local politics. Local political factors shape regionalism. Very few people do everything in just their city. Increasingly, we're used to living in one community, working in another, shopping in a third, and traveling to visit friends and families, catching a ball game, making a trek to the ocean or the Sierras. And people expect the system to function and work well. It is undeniable that what happens in my community affects neighboring communities and so forth, like drops in a pond that radiate out. Now, what could happen if cities independently try to solve problems in just their own city that really affect multi-jurisdictions, and neighboring cities are unaware of those solutions and, in turn, unprepared to respond to neighboring fixes? I liken possible consequences to cities seeking their own solution to the following clip. Now, while I'm not trying to say Belmont or other cities are that ill-equipped to solve problems as Curly, I'm trying to point out in a humorous way that there are sometimes unintended consequences, cross purposes, fragmented thinking, loss of vital resources, and inevitable confusion. And if we're not working together on matters that concern the region, like traffic and housing, we will not survive. Now, Curly could have called Mo and Larry and maybe would have figured out a better solution, or not. We can call on one another to figure these solutions out. Now, the harsh reality of the current political landscape will undoubtedly affect us working together. We have an electorate who is suspicious of government solutions, and some have a strong desire to criticize without adding solutions. And others no longer want to experiment. They want to close the lab down and return to a simpler path. Joseph Bodavolt stated, "A clergyman might say there's a decline in the notion that we are all our brother's keeper, a decline in the sense of community that may be a prerequisite to moving ahead." And I believe he was on to something. We cannot move forward well unless we widen our concept of community. We need to be Belmont plus, San Mateo and more. Go beyond these political imaginary boundaries. You can drive from San Carlos to Belmont to San Mateo along Alameda de las Pulgas and not notice that you've changed city 3 times. Now, some of you may be saying to yourself, we're doing all this already. In response, I would say yes and no. To paraphrase one of the leading land attorneys in this area, 30 years ago in California, we were talking about how to solve two things, housing and traffic. Today, we are still talking about how to solve two things, housing and traffic. So there's always room for improvement, and I propose that we concentrate on two areas, 5 actually. First, visioning to the populace. Start an ongoing conversation with the general public, and not right before we need to take a vote on something, to understand, envision, and support what our desirable regional futures are, and be honest about the trade-offs involved in pursuing them. Changing an us versus them mentality, a city versus city, takes time. I have a good friend who just the other day said, we don't want to be like, and you fill in the city that you think goes there. And just the other weekend, I know she was there for movies and dinner, had coffee and drinks. She relied on that infrastructure created in another city, but demonized them in the same breath. We have to change the conversation and push back on a united front to say that no, we are one whole community working together. Political will, not to play the blame game and be flexible to adapt to changing conditions. We really need to pursue fundamental reforms that political leaders will get very little reward, but in the long run, it will change the game and be important for the future of this area. A recent example of a successful political will maneuver, I think, is the Peninsula Clean Energy Initiative. We all gathered around together and made it happen. I would also suggest prioritizing planning equity for disadvantaged, low-income communities and smaller cities. How evenly are we distributing opportunities to smaller cities that have low economic-based communities? Fiscal incentives for regional cooperation should be more widespread. Bay Area Alliance created the Social Equity Caucus and acknowledged that issue. We should do more of that. Analyze what works in other places and implement models on a small scale to start. Leipzig model in Germany of city governance is a great example. Chattanooga, Tennessee with their placemaking and revitalization. Vancouver, Canada for creating a bustling city nestled in beautiful natural setting. And last, regional innovation. Instead of forming the question around what are our regional problems, what about forming and focusing on what our regional assets are? What do we have that we can capitalize? We are also a world economy. We have world-class universities, research facilities, strong investment community, biotech and technology minds in the Bay Area. Let's delete the fragmentation and link these communities around some of the think tanks for civic good, for region, and implementation. Now, with all that is before us, there's definitely light at the end of the tunnel. California is the 8th largest economy in the world. The great experiment is still working. With vision, leadership, innovation, sacrifice, California led in producing the needed infrastructure and the foundation of our prosperity and quality of life. We can do it again. And we have to if we want to keep people, industry, and innovation here. Now, I hope that more than receiving answers, you receive inspiration from Curly and myself to recalibrate all the hard work that many regional entities, all of you stakeholders in this room, and the public have been doing over the years to take it to the next level. Let's spend our time getting things done and leave the arm wrestling for the national arena. Denmark is said to be the happiest country. I would like to see San Mateo County and Santa Clara County to be the happiest region. I look forward to working with all of you.
Well, thank you very much for being here and sharing this time together for the good of San Mateo County and Silicon Valley and California and the efforts that we're all here to promote. I'm inspired by what Roseanne said at the beginning, which is that what we're looking for today is San Mateo County approach to problem solving. And I hope that that is what I am able to talk about, because my background is as an what we call a venture capital impact investor, meaning that I have invested in companies that should be able to make as much money as possible, but that also solve significant social problems. And in that context, I've invested in Tesla and Solar City and Revolution Foods and SAMCEDA member Proterra. And all of those have been very successful, and they also solve significant social problems. So I'm hopeful that we can do much more of that together. And I'm certainly here to advocate regionalism as well. This is me. That's someone with darker hair than I have, but my father told me many years ago, the older you get, be sure to use an older and older picture, and certainly it's one of the pieces of advice I remember. We do live in the middle of the greatest wealth creation engine in the world. I think that we all know that. Unemployment rate of 2.9% in this county means, of course, that we have to import workers from other counties because we simply don't have enough for our county. We're rated number 1 in employment, or lowest in unemployment, and there are only approximately 13,000 people in this county who are unemployed. That's the good news. The less good news, of course, is that this prosperity is not universal. In fact, certainly in the presidential election that we're in the middle of, there's a lot of talk about the declining middle class and what has happened to the middle class in this country, and that is given anyway as an explanation for a lot of the political trends that we see. The data on this chart shows you that income has become much more concentrated in the last 25 years. In San Mateo County, it used to be that the top 1% 25 years ago accounted for about 17% of all income. And now the top 1% accounts for 46% of all income. That's quite a dramatic change in 25 years. So that has many consequences, to be sure. And relevant to what we're discussing today, I think the most important consequence is the middle class has left San Mateo County. And as you can see on this chart, in San Mateo County, what the California Budget and Policy Center describes as middle class households have gone from about 59% to about, I'm having trouble reading it, but you all can read it better than I can, I'm sure, 48% in this 25-year period, whereas lower income households have gone from about 32% to about 37%. That's in San Francisco County. And in San Mateo County, from about 29% to 33%. And at the same time, higher income households in San Mateo County have gone from about 12% to about 19%. So again, this national trend that we have heard about a lot is even more pronounced where we live. So, of course, I've long thought, I wonder if this has occurred to some of you, that what's happening to our area is very much like New York. It used to be that in Manhattan you only had rich people and poor people. Increasingly in New York City, in Brooklyn, for example, it is mostly rich people and poor people. And the problem is we have a similar trend without the same infrastructure that exists in New York City because they built subways, et cetera, 100 years ago. So what can be done about that? There are alternatives to investing in more infrastructure, although I believe we need to do that, and we'll talk more about that. But because we're based in San Mateo County and because we're standing in the Oracle Conference Center, obviously part of the solution has to be technology-based, and we have an opportunity to take advantage of that. You probably all know that electric utility demand has been quite dramatically curtailed in California because of the use of demand-side management, which are technology-based products that with differential pricing and other technology capabilities have allowed us to avoid building additional power plants. Because by using similar technologies, which is to say using bridges, roads, and other infrastructure more efficiently, we don't necessarily have to build as much as in other jurisdictions if we're able to take advantage of our developments in technology. Now, where will some of that money come from? Where does some of that money come from? It comes from venture capital. To discuss this for a moment, because if I am saying, and I am, that technology will provide some of the solutions to our challenges, It's important to note that the venture capital business, which of course started here and continues to prosper here in San Mateo County, continues to do very well. There have been some significant changes. There have been consolidation among venture capital partnerships, but there's been a huge influx of corporate investment as well. As you drive up and down Sand Hill Road, one of the signs you now see is Schlumberger, which has a huge innovation center for energy exploration and related applications of technology, because they see the same thing that we're talking about. And that's one of hundreds of examples that I'm sure you're all aware of. So the venture community continues to prosper here. There's a lot of money to invest in the solutions that we need. And on the right chart, you see that San Mateo County continues to be a very major factor in venture activity. However, it's broadening out a bit. It's not quite as concentrated. Venture investments are not quite as concentrated in San Mateo County as they used to be. I think from an overall societal standpoint, that's probably a good thing, because what it indicates is that because of the success of this model, it's broadening out to other regions of the US and the world. These are simply some examples of early stage, expansion stage, and late stage investments. It's interesting to note that many of them are a stone's throw from where we're standing right now, whether it's Foster City or Redwood City. So the innovation engine continues to work very well. The draw of Silicon Valley, as we know, is innovation. So I just want to tell a few stories from this page that I think bring that to life. Proterra, which I mentioned, is a company that I have invested in and is a SAMCEDA member, which is very important, is an electric bus company. They were founded in Greenville, South Carolina, and moved their headquarters about a year ago to Burlingame, California. Greenville sounded right to me, because after all, that's where most of the European and Asian car companies do their manufacturing, and so that went with what I would have expected. So why did they move here? They moved here because as an electric vehicle company, what's important to them, in addition to metal bending, of course, is technology. It is advanced batteries, and it is software upgrades. As any of you who drive a Tesla know, the way you get your Tesla to have added features is through software upgrades, like a computer. Well, because it is a computer, and to some extent the Proterra bus is a computer, it's certainly a computer-driven vehicle. In the same sense, all of the advanced manufacturing opportunities that investors and others are excited about are computer-driven manufacturing systems, generally speaking, which is why this area, which has the most talented computer scientists and engineers and others in the world, which is why this area will continue to prosper, particularly for those in those fields. But as we just saw, it doesn't guarantee that for everyone. In addition, I just had the privilege of being at Stanford Health with our SAMCEDA chair, and I learned that Stanford Health and IBM are doing an all-day session at GSV Labs, which is basically across the freeway, on digital health. Because similarly, in addition to the big challenge we all face with climate change, we also face an imperative of reducing the cost of healthcare delivery. Fortunately, venture capital and Oracle and other large technology-based organizations will work with Stanford and Sutter and Dignity and others in an effort to solve those problems. The point I'm trying to make is this area will remain critical to solving the world's most important problems, and that is for us a great opportunity. But we've certainly heard about challenges. The cost of housing is extremely high. Rental rates here average now about $3,000 as of 3 months ago. Home price is $1.2 million. And I've observed, I'm sure many of you have, particularly those who are in the real estate business, that rents have increased more near Caltrain and Samtrans than they have farther from Caltrain and Samtrans, which I take as a very positive sign, because people recognize the importance of public transportation and are beginning to value it. And certainly companies, as they seek locations, are beginning to value it, which is terrific. With respect to housing, there are a couple of proposals that we've heard today, which I certainly believe that people are more important in getting a house than cars. So I thought that was an extremely creative observation that I've never heard, and I hope to help in any way to help that along. Also, the Bay Area Council has proposed making it easier for homeowners to add second units to their homes, which to me makes a great deal of sense because, of course, the principal reason it's so expensive around here is the cost of land. And when you add a second unit, there is no incremental cost of land. So therefore, it's a very practical approach. And the other, I think, is denser housing. And I'm a director of Habitat for Humanity, and we're building a high-rise, which is a brand new thing for Habitat for Humanity in Redwood City. And we've been helped by Roseanne and many others in this room to achieve that. So that's an example of a social enterprise, a not-for-profit model that has to adjust to take advantage, to continue to serve its mission in a changing environment. Also, I mentioned earlier demand-side management facilitated by technology. You may be familiar with a company called Upwork. There are a few other similar companies, but this is essentially eBay for workers. In other words, it is a marketplace that matches those who need work with those who will provide work. Most often, those who provide that work do it from home or from a remote location of their choice, which of course is terrific because that means they're not adding to the congestion on 101 or even Caltrain or Samtrans for that matter. They're working in the most carbon neutral way they could, which is by not transporting themselves at all. Solutions like that are another technology-based approach to how we should solve this problem. But I definitely want to add what may be the most controversial thing, but it may be super regionalism, which is, I believe, a key part of the solution is high-speed rail. It is 38 minutes. It will be, I have to say, 38 minutes from Fresno to San Jose. I did some work with the mayor of Fresno in an effort to work with them to do the kind of investing we're talking about to diversify their economy. And in the course of that, learned a great deal about Fresno and the Central Valley. So I think a regional, or call it a super regional solution, if that makes more sense, is valley to valley. Because these are things we know about Silicon Valley. It's expensive, it's crowded, there's very low unemployment, and there are excellent education facilities and institutions. And what we know about the Central Valley is it's much less expensive. The average cost of a house in Fresno is 20 to 25% of Silicon Valley. It's much less crowded. There is high unemployment. You may not be aware that certain parts of the Central Valley have 40% unemployment, and certain parts of the Central Valley are the poorest parts of the US. Every bit as poor as Appalachia, and they're about 100 miles, 125 miles from where we are. And the education systems with UC Merced, Fresno State, and others are not the equal of the Bay Area today, but they're getting better. There's a whole entrepreneurship focus of high schools in Fresno. So, and this is not intended to be an ad for Fresno. What it is intended to be is a thought that we have the two regions, which are adjacent, complementary needs and complementary features. And so wonder if we couldn't work more closely together, and with high-speed rail we can. Lastly, and this is certainly not an advertisement for any presidential candidate, but is a way to make America great again, to bring some operations that are overseas back to the Central Valley. To some extent, it is doable. The senior executives of tech companies I have talked to have said, yes, certain capabilities of the workforce that we have distributed around the world do exist in the Central Valley, and it is much cheaper, and there are many people who can't afford to buy a house here who would love to live in the Central Valley. So I think that's a possibility. So thank you for listening to my thoughts, and thank you very much, SAMCEDA.
Hi, thank you all for staying. That's a pretty impressive group to follow, and I hope I make it worth your while here. Those of you who interact with Sobrato usually do it by touching one of these three organizations, which historically have operated largely separately. Sobrato Development, that's the real estate organization that I work with. The Sobrato Family Foundation, that is our main philanthropic organization, or Sobrato Capital. And Sobrato Capital is our non-real estate investments. And what I really want to talk to you about today is a question we're working on and struggling with, which is, should an organization like ours, which is committed to high-quality real estate development, philanthropy, has substantial financial resources, and is committed to long-term investment, shouldn't we be able to do more than these three groups individually can accomplish? And how can we do more as one organization rather than three separate organizations? And to dive into that, I really want to start with our Family Foundation. They came up several years ago with a mission statement that you see here. Make Silicon Valley a place of opportunity for all of its residents. And what I really want to talk about is how can we make that the mission statement for all of our organization? Bringing all of us together under an umbrella, call it Sobrato Philanthropies, making Silicon Valley a place of opportunity for all its residents. Now, many of you may know the Sobratos have committed to giving away at least half of their wealth to charitable causes. They've committed to do that entirely locally, and that's why they have Silicon Valley, which we define as the entire Bay Area, as the focus of our opportunities here. When you think about the real estate development, which is what I'm here to talk to you about, think about it in terms of at least 50% of the profit we develop through real estate will wind up in the Family Foundation. And I don't see a conflict between profit and nonprofit. I see a synergy between profit and nonprofit. When I think about this, I first want to look at the history of how we've been doing it. And I think you all know an enormous amount of wealth has been created in this area and around the world through real estate. And many families, not only Sobratos, have given much of that away. The Sobratos are part of this, what I will call the original model of real estate and philanthropy. For us, it started in 1991. We developed the Apple World Headquarters. In 1995, we sold the headquarters to Apple. And a year later, we founded the Sobrato Family Foundation with much of the proceeds from that sale. And since that time, we've given almost $350 million away, profits from the real estate organization to local causes that the Sobratos support. John Sr., our founder, likes to say we make the money over here and we give it away over there. And that's great. It's been a fantastic model, but honestly, it doesn't create any more synergy than investing money that's been made through the stock market or through a tech startup into philanthropy. There's no synergy between the real estate and the philanthropy. It's merely funding it. It's also inefficient, and I say this with Jerry Hill looking at me here. I apologize, Senator Hill, but much of the money when we do it this way goes to taxes. And taxes are important. I'm not saying they aren't, but most of our taxes go to things outside of the Bay Area, the federal government or the state government. The Sobrato's mission is about the Bay Area. We want to keep as many of those dollars working here in the Bay Area. So we thought there's got to be a better model. And as time went by and our real estate portfolio aged, we found some ways to do that. We used to develop lovely buildings like this one in 1977 in Milpitas. And over time, these buildings became obsolete. And we started tearing them down and building newer, bigger buildings that met the need of the technology community. But at the same time, rents went up. And nonprofits in this area were faced with a really terrible choice. Either spend more and more of their budget on rent or move farther and farther away from the local populations they're trying to serve. Not a good choice at all. And the Sobratos came upon a better idea than tearing down these buildings, which was giving these buildings to nonprofits. And 461 Valley Way became the first Sobrato Center for nonprofits. We give free office space to local nonprofits. We host meetings for nonprofits who don't have conference facilities of their own. And we did this in 2002. It was shortly followed by San Jose in 2008, and right here in Redwood Shores, half a mile from here in 2012. We now host 71 nonprofit organizations rent-free in these three centers. Last year, we hosted more than 8,000 meetings for nonprofit organizations at these three centers. So this is what I'm going to call the improved model. It's more efficient. There are no taxes involved. It directly addresses the needs of the nonprofits, and there is a real tie between the real estate. Now there is synergy. The real estate and the philanthropy are working together. But it's still not perfect. We developed 461 Valley Way in 1977. It started serving nonprofits in 2012. It took us 25 years to get there. This is philanthropy after we've wrung all of the value out of the real estate. And that's good, that's nice, but we got to be able to do more. And so we asked the next question: how can our projects more directly and more immediately address the barriers to opportunity in Silicon Valley? And I go back to that. Remember, what we're trying to do is create opportunity for all residents of Silicon Valley. And there were three areas we thought we could focus on: traffic, housing affordability, and education, which sounds kind of familiar after hearing our other speakers. How is this about opportunity for the residents? Well, think about it for a second, the working parent. He's got a child struggling in school. They'd love to get home and help the child after work, but they're stuck in traffic, or they're driving an hour and a half from the Central Valley to their job. The school's under-resourced, can't provide after-school help. So that's the trifecta for that family. They're having reduced opportunity because of housing inaffordability, traffic, and educational problems. So what are we going to do about this? How can real estate development help these three issues? Let me start with traffic. Historically, real estate development is treated as an impact that has to be mitigated. Our entire CEQA law is developed around this idea that essentially development is a bad that you have to make better. But we believe real estate can be part of the solution, and the key to that solution is mixed use. And by mixed use, I mean specifically putting housing next to office space. Great to have retail as well, but it's the housing and the office space that we think is key. You get less traffic, shorter commutes, less commute pollution, more vibrancy. This particular project, and I've left the cities out of my slides here. None of these projects are fully approved by the cities. I don't want to presume that they will approve these projects, but I do want to explain what we're thinking. I think this project is located in the single worst location for jobs housing imbalance in the entire Bay Area. This area has about 30,000 jobs and 300 housing units, 100 to 1. What we're doing, working with the city, is planning 240,000 square feet of office space, but next to it, 650 market rate apartments, 110 affordable housing units, sharing parking, sharing open space, sharing amenities. And by doing this, we're going to take 133 cars off of the road every day, not versus what would have happened because of this development, but versus now when there's nothing there. Overall traffic is going to go down. Pollution's going to go down. This project will be the equivalent of planting 5 acres of forest every single year that it exists. We are now planning housing in every project on the peninsula where the city will allow us to plan housing, whether it's 100% housing or it's mixed use. Every project we do where the city will allow us has housing. So what about housing? We see this as the single biggest threat to our economic prosperity here. I've actually never heard of traffic destroying an economy. Go to London, go to New York. Housing could. You've heard about that already today. This is a site, or actually to just address that, we believe you need more supply at all levels. Market rate, affordable, all levels. But I want to be realistic. The fact that we're going to build an apartment next to this office building doesn't mean the receptionist is going to sell his car and move into a $3,000 a month apartment. And yes, it takes $3,000 a month rents to build apartments in the Bay Area. That's just the financial reality. So what we're trying to do is to partner with the cities to make affordable housing accretive for both the city and for us. How do we do that? This is 15 acres of land that we own. 11 acres has this great mixed-use zoning that I'm talking about, where we are not only allowed but encouraged to build housing next to office. We get to build more if we build both. But the vacant lot you see on the right-hand side is 4 acres that can only be built with commercial, industrial, or office space. If we build it per zoning, we'll build 400 market rate apartments, we'll build 600,000 square feet of commercial space, and we'll pay impact fees that will fund the construction of 40 apartments, but with a catch. You still have to have the land. The fees won't pay for the land, and buying land in a transit-served location like this is almost impossible to affordable housing developers. But what if we can take that great zoning from the left hand of the site and move it to the right hand of the site? Now we have the same zoning, and we can build the same market rate apartments. Remember, we need housing supply at all levels. We can also build, not fund, not pay fees for, we can build and actually deliver 120 affordable apartments by partnering with one of the great developers of affordable housing in the Bay Area. And we only suffer a mild loss of 30,000 square feet of office simply by changing the zoning. It's a win for everybody. The city gets a more vibrant, mixed-use, mixed-income development. We still have a project that will be very profitable and will fund our family foundation for the next 50 years. Education. Education seems a little less directly involved. The Sobrato Family Foundation has been a huge supporter of education from its inception. Many of you may know the SEAL program, which is an early reading program that was started here in Redwood City. And while we give money to that every year, we're, again, looking for a new model, a more efficient model. Here, you've got a chance to partner with an organization that promotes education, that has land, but it doesn't have cash and it doesn't have real estate expertise. This land is owned by the Diocese of San Jose, and we're partnering with them to build 100,000 square feet of office space and 12 rental units. And this will provide $1 million a year at least to the parish, which you see the church behind the building there, the historic church, and the parish will have at least $1 million a year to fund its mission, which includes the local parochial school. And we don't see this as only an opportunity with private education. Our public schools are real estate rich. Most of them are underdeveloped, most of them are one story, but they don't have the expertise and they don't have the cash. And we're looking for opportunities to partner with them to either create a cash flow or to partner with them for even more creative ideas, like developing affordable housing for their teachers so they can attract and they can retain teacher talent, which has become such a problem for them. Now, none of these projects exist yet, and we have challenges, and we don't know if it's going to work, but we're trying. I want to touch on some of the challenges. Sometimes we have like-minded groups, but we run into what I describe as making the perfect the enemy of the good. Sometimes by insisting on 50% affordable housing, you end up getting no housing at all. There are neighborhoods in San Francisco insisting on 100%. There is no housing that's going to come when that happens. We run into competing values where I see 12 acres of open land and I see a mixed-use development with housing and office space and cash flow to fund our foundation for the next 50 years. Other people see parks and they see sports fields, and I appreciate that. Just different values. And we do face the fear of abuse. The IRS is making it harder and harder for our profit and our nonprofit arms to work together, and unfortunately, it's because people have abused the nonprofit side. But we're trying to work through these issues, and we're optimistic. And as we go forward, I'm really hoping that you all don't think about Sobrato Development or the Sobrato Family Foundation, but you simply think about us as the Sobrato organization. Thank you.
Before I get into actually thanking each of our speakers, because they certainly left us with a number of thoughts that I think we can all take away today, I'd actually just like to make some acknowledgments for folks that came in. Again, I'd like to thank State Senator Jerry Hill for being with us today. Thank you, Jerry. The one thing we are very fortunate about in this county is our elected officials at both the national, state, and local level. They're here, they're engaged, they're in our communities on a regular basis. And I think sometimes we may not think about that. So to have Jerry with us today, he's available, he's open, and he listens. You might not always agree on things, but that's okay. That's what makes the world go around, and that goes with our elected officials. I also want to acknowledge the Mayor of Galway, Ireland, who is here with us today. Mayor Fahey, please. It's very exciting as someone of Irish descent, which how many in the room are of Irish descent while we're at it? Okay. It's very nice that Mayor Klein and Mayor Pro Temp Kirsten Keith, they were able to, with Facebook, thank you Fergus, to have our friends from Galway with us here today to hear about some of the challenges that we face. And I'm guessing housing and transportation comes up in Galway. I see the nodding of the head. Think about the comments that were made today. Think about Jeral from Google and the things that Google is doing transportation-wise. It isn't just about buses. It's about the Bay Trail. It's about connectivity. Think about Bella and her comments about, okay, frankly, I would like my children to house me, not my car. So it's a very different way to approach things and to think about them. I think about Davina, and I love the fact that she incorporated the Three Stooges, because sometimes through humor, we can get overwhelmed with these problems. They are tremendous challenges, how to build a regional structure. And yet, if you can think about it and throw a little humor in, I think we're all willing to sit at the table. when Mike talked about Fresno and saying he wasn't doing a commercial for Fresno, I was thinking to myself, you know what? It's 130 miles high-speed rail-wise between Silicon Valley and Fresno. It is two valleys. There are opportunities, and that is regionalism. So, in thinking about the economy and also the innovation piece, we're going to solve things through innovation. And I really appreciated what Rob just did by showcasing the Sobrato organization in a very different way for all of us. Many of us know it through philanthropy. Some of us know it through commercial real estate. But to have it kind of grouped together and shown what can be accomplished, I really think what we did today through our first THRED talks was weaving San Mateo County together, weaving the people, weaving the issues, and weaving the ideas that I hope you'll leave here today with. I again want to thank our chair, Sherry Sager, our board of directors. I'd like you to note, and I could find the clicker and put it up, but it talks about our next event, which we do with the Redwood City San Mateo County Chamber of Commerce, and that's our business golf tournament at the end of September. You'll be hearing more about it. But you'll be seeing more on THRED Talks. You'll be seeing more of the issues. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. I'm extremely, and now I'm going to just let the personality come out, instead of being all like buttoned up here. I think the ideas that we have shared today, I'm so excited. I mean, whenever you plan something, you're like, okay, I hope this goes off as you hope. This has gone off better than I think any of us could have imagined. And I'm really looking forward to the discussions that we're going to have collectively in our various organizations going forward. So thank you for joining us today. I wish you all a wonderful weekend, and I'm just going to say, go Dubs.